Well, this is all very responsible. Don't you think this is like responsible and mature and grown up? I mean, it's such a great list, but it's just like so responsible. It's like, oh, we're going to put up with anything. We're going to always trust God. We're always going to look for the best. We're not going to have a swelled head. We're not going to strut. We're not going to take delight when someone else is having a hard time. It's a lot to ask of a very mature and kind of responsible love. But what about crazy love? Now, I'm not talking about crazy love. I'm just talking about crazy love, that love that is just so full in your heart that you almost explode, that you feel like you're floating on clouds, you feel like you're transported, you feel like you're in a different realm. What about that kind of love? What about infatuation? What about being infatuated? Now, you look up infatuated on the internet, and all the synonyms are relatively negative, but I'd like to see if we can reclaim this word, this idea that we might be so full of this generous love, this amazing, generous love, that we are different people. Now, when I look at myself, when I look around at my communities, I don't see people who need to practice being responsible. We've got that down. I see people who need to be filled with the spirit of love. Practicing all that responsible stuff, which we do so well, but with that experience of being full of the spirit of love. I watched a YouTube video this week. I don't even know how I happened about it, but it was a guy who was proposing to his boyfriend, and he gathered a whole bunch of people, they choreographed a dance, and they did it in the aisle of a Home Depot. And, there were about, it looked like 35 or 40 dancers, and they were all dancing together. And then you could see people coming in, and you just knew it was the members of their families. And his boyfriend was standing up on one of those, they have those step things to get to the high shelves. He was standing up there, and he was just aglow. That's a kind of crazy love, isn't it? Some of you, of course, will remember Cordelia Stransko. And Cordelia, a little while back, took on a foster child as an infant on the path that eventually she would adopt this baby. And the baby was born on October 22nd, 2012. She came to Cordelia on November 1st, so she was just a week or two old. And on September 6th, the adoption was official. And Cordelia writes quite a bit about her experience with Beatrix Evangeline, isn't that a great name, on Facebook. And when Cordelia writes about this child, you are absolutely convinced this is the only child on the planet. And you can just tell that she is full of crazy love. And I would guess that even though you're all sitting there very politely, which I appreciate, when I'm talking, I do appreciate that you're all sitting there, very responsibly and paying attention and all that, but I bet almost every one of you at some point or another has been infatuated with one thing or another. On Saturday, I was over here painting banners, and there happened to be a football game going on, and there were clearly a lot of people on the street who were infatuated with both Cal, and there were a surprising number of people wearing red T-shirts from Ohio State, and they didn't seem to be at all concerned about taking up their share of the space. I figure if you show up for an Ohio State football game in California, you must be infatuated. It is a kind of crazy love. Now, don't get me wrong. I think that this book, this chapter of 1 Corinthians, the love chapter, is brilliant. It's brilliant. And we use it a lot, and we hear it a lot. And it is full of deep wisdom. Actually, if I had kids, I would be preaching this to them every day of the week. Forget about the crazy love stuff. I wouldn't tell them at all about the crazy love stuff. I would just preach to them from chapter 13 in Corinthians. It's brilliant. And of course, it's picking up from what Jesus was teaching. You know, at one point, someone asked him, what are the most important commandments? And Jesus boils it down. He says, love God. Not just with your mind, but with your heart and your spirit and your strength. And love your neighbor as yourself. And when he said neighbors, as he said in other spots, he also meant enemies. That is crazy love. That is crazy love. This is a brilliant chapter, and personally I think you could take those two commandments that Jesus stated and this interpretation that Paul has given in chapter 13, and that would be enough. If we just carried that, you know how people are always pulling out their constitutions from their jacket pockets. If we would just stick those three things on a piece of paper and carry it around in our jacket pockets, if we even wore jackets, I haven't had a jacket on in forever, but I would put it in some pocket, carry it with me all the time. This community in Corinth was in trouble. It was a new community of Jesus. Paul, the Apostle Paul, had kind of planted this church in Corinth. He had gone on to another place, and he started to hear complaints about what was going on in Corinth. And he wrote them a really long letter, and he just laid it out. And so for the few weeks in September and early October, we're going to just look at the book of Corinthians. And we're going to look at this community that was in transition and to see what there is to learn about times of transition and change from this community of people who were in a time of transition and change, and to see what words of wisdom Paul had for them. And it seems to me that the message of Paul is pretty simple. Go back to the basics. You know, last week we were looking at this question of who was the leader in Corinth? People in Corinth were saying, well, I'm a leader of this person, or I'm a leader of that person. And Paul reminded them, no, you are not leaders, you're not followers of me or any of those other people in the community. You are followers of Jesus. He needed to remind them who they were supposed to be following. And in this chapter, again, it's just so basic. Here's the rule. Love. That's the rule. Love. It's so simple. Follow Jesus. Love. Now, fortunately, he goes on a little bit about it to give us some of this wonderful wisdom about how love works. And, you know, in Greek, there are several words for love. And the word that's used in this particular passage is agape. And frankly, I think the idea of agape love is one of the biggest gifts that Christian tradition gives to the world. Because it's really this idea of love in community. And it's a kind of selfless love. It's like, I don't have a lot of expectations about what's going to come back to me from this love. I'm willing to give it because I recognize that you and I are one, that our lives are woven together, that we need each other. I need you, you need me. We are all part of God's body. It's such simple and brilliant wisdom. So in the Greek, they've taken some of the ideas of love and they've separated them out and they've given them slightly different words. And that is valuable because we can start to see in our language we use this love word and we use it in a lot of different ways. But one of the challenges when you separate out the meanings is that you may not get the full experience. And that's all I'm saying this morning, is that I want the love of chapter 13 in 1 Corinthians for myself and for all of you and for the world But I also want just a little bit of crazy love mixed in, to remember that it's not like love. It's like love. Because it's just so energizing. It's like it makes you want to dance with love. And you know, when you dance with love, pretty one, everyone, even though they're still sitting there politely in their seats, inside they're all going, that's the effect of crazy love. But here's the real point. So if you've tuned out, tune back in now. God is infatuated with us. God is crazy love in love with us. I do not know why. It makes no sense to me. But thank God. Amen.